ahead and press record. Thank you so much for being here tonight with us, Denise. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us on helping our kids have a successful school year. I'm going to let you briefly talk about yourself and your experience and then jump right in. And I know that you have a presentation and you should be able to screen share. That should all be ready for you to jump in.
Great. Well, thank you, Sandy. Thank you so much. Like Sandy said, my name is Denise Johnson. I'm actually a teacher here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I teach at West High School. It's actually the gear that I currently have on. So a little bit about me. I was actually adopted as a baby. So this work that Rise Up does with preparing teenagers and adolescents is very near and dear to my heart, just because organizations like this supported me and my family as I was growing up. I have 2 biological siblings and 4 adopted siblings, so I grew up in a big home. And then my husband and I love trying out new restaurants. I enjoy square dancing and really any cultural event that takes place here in Knoxville. So, Krista, I know I got to hear your name. Could you tell me a little more about you? Where you're located, the number of your kids, foster kids. You don't have to put your camera on. I have seen you, but I would love to just hear a little bit about you.
Well, I'm a foster mom. My husband and I started a couple of years ago. Right now, we have 3 children in our home, 1 biological, 1 pre-adoptive, and 1 foster. Now, tomorrow that changes because we're taking 3 more foster children in. So that's just kind of how it goes when fostering.
Wow, that's awesome that you guys are able to do that. And what are the ages of the kids, like your pre-adoptive child, your biological child, and maybe some of the ages of the foster kids?
Okay, from top to bottom, we have 16, 14, 13. Oh, another 14-year-old's coming tomorrow. And then we have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Oh, wow, that's a big span of ages. Well, hopefully some of these tips can hit all of your kids, maybe in different ways. And
Thank
I
you.
also love to keep this presentation very engaging and talkative. I understand if, you might not be able to respond to everything, but I just do this because, I'm a teacher, but I'm not a parent. And I think that when teachers and parents work together, there's just nothing we can do, nothing we can't do. But trying to do it on my own or you trying to do it on your own can be very overwhelming. So a lot of this is going to be a very cooperative presentation. And I love this quote. It says, education is a shared commitment between dedicated teachers, motivated students, and enthusiastic parents with high expectations. I think that, especially with you being here, it's very clear that you probably have high expectations and that you're very enthusiastic. And so I look forward to working through some of these tips. Now, like I said, I hope you leave this session with some practical ways to serve your child. So that's my objective today. And reflecting over 2020, what are some struggles that you and your child faced? And what are some concerns going into this year?
Well, most of my children, when they come into foster care, are behind due to trauma. And so I feel like we're always playing catch up. And then with COVID, I feel like we're playing catch up even more because more education was lost due to having it online and then in class and then having to leave class to go back online. And so I feel like that has compounded the issues that the children are facing this year.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of these things you've said, but the socially distanced classroom, anxiety about world events, depression, academic gaps, all those things are challenges that our students are facing. Now, I will say, even though this picture is very doom and gloom, there is a lot of things that we can take from 2020 that can be things that really push our students and push our children just to higher places this year. For example, when things are as they're walking into this year, reminding them that, hey, you made it through last year. You're still here. You're still smiling. Or talking about, the education lost, right? They learned a lot that maybe can't be scored and tested on a state exam, but it was survival. Things like learning to adjust to new education modes. Telling them, man, I tell my nephew all the time, he's 10 years old, and I tell him, you're going to be a genius. Like, how to operate a computer better than I did when I was 18, 19. You know how to operate better in a digital classroom than I do. So just things like that, while there are a lot of challenges that they faced, we can definitely encourage them as they're moving into, the post-COVID classroom. So how do you normally prepare for a school year?
Ours is mainly trying to figure out how many kids we have and how many schools we need to register for.
Yes.
It's not a whole lot of, okay, let's do our workbooks to get prepared, make sure we don't lose, too much workable knowledge, things of that nature. It's ours is more of a survival kind of thing. Let's get everybody organized. Let's start waking up early so that our routine is set when school starts, things of that nature.
Okay, so a lot of these tips you'll be very familiar with, but I think there are some that you're going to be pleasantly surprised with, because while we can't necessarily always address some of these gaps head on, right? We can't fix them overnight. We can do things that help close these gaps, even for some of those kids that might not stay with you for the entire year. So looking at number one, and you mentioned it, setting up good sleep habits. One of the biggest things that my kids have issues with in the classroom is staying awake, which I can totally relate to, because I remember I used to stay up late at night and go to school in the morning, and that I'd be tired, and one of the things that we can do with that is like making sure they don't have any caffeine, no soda, no chocolate, nothing that's too sugary before bed. Limiting the technology might be hard, especially if you have a teenager who's used to their phone, who's used to, just using that technology, but maybe you can help them set a bedtime routine. Maybe you can limit their technology before bed by having them get ready and then spending the last, 30 minutes before bed writing in their journal, or drawing a picture, or coloring in a book, or if you have a kid under 12 and they like toys, letting them play with those toys a couple of minutes before bed, in their bed, things like that. I know my 10-year-old nephew came to stay with me, and he is huge on technology. I mean, huge. And he was just like, you are not getting me in bed before midnight. Like, I am staying up till midnight. And I said, challenge accepted. So I would take away his cell phone at around 8:30, and we would spend 30 minutes brushing his teeth, getting his pajamas on, and then I would put him in bed, and we would have a short conversation before he went to sleep, and then I would just let him toss and turn a little bit. And sometimes I would go in there and talk to him a little bit more until he got even more tired. Other times I just let him toss and turn. And after actually, it only took about one day, he was asleep every day at 9 p.m. And he resented it very much. He wasn't a fan. And he would say, well, I guess I was more tired than I thought. And I was like, think you were. And I had him for a whole week and a half, and he went to bed every day at 9 p.m. because I was just not going to stay up with him. So, just trying whatever you can. Another idea too is maybe having some tea or warm milk if they're, post potty training, maybe something like that. But if they're not, just trying something. It could be you singing, or reading a storybook or something like that. But anything like that would really help your child adjust to that schedule, because they really do need that sleep. That sleep will help them feel less anxious. That sleep will help them focus better. So that would just be a great thing. Now, preparing a healthy breakfast and lunch. Now, as I was preparing this tip, I was a little nervous because I understand that you guys are on a time crunch, and that as parents, you guys have so much going on. And it's not always feasible to be able to pack snacks and to, do all these elaborate meals. And so I tried to think of things that you guys could do that could be very quick. And so I was thinking about, buying things like keeping frozen fruit on hand, keeping frozen fruit in your freezer and then taking it out and having the kids blend up a smoothie, or keeping breakfast bars, in a bowl in the middle of your table, so that when the kids are going out, they can have those breakfast bars, or keeping protein shakes in the fridge. One of the biggest things that I notice with my kids is one of two things. Either they come to school hungry, and so they don't focus on anything else before they eat. And often they don't eat the cafeteria food because, whether we like to admit it or not, it's not always the best food. And so they don't eat in the cafeteria, they haven't eaten at home. And they come into the classroom and I expect them to cooperate and work. And sometimes that's just not possible. So as teachers, I will tell you, a lot of us keep snacks in our classroom, and that's not always feasible for us because we don't always have the resources to do that. So if you can think of maybe, some quick snacks to buy. I know for meal prep ideas, my husband and I, we are avid shoppers at Kroger, and Kroger has a lot of ready-made things. They have, like for whole grains, they have rices that you can warm up in 90 seconds. So just keeping it simple, but also making the kids be a part of this. Have them involved preparing the meals. Maybe that can be a chore, that one or two of them get involved with, where, one kid has trash duty, one kid has meal prep duty, and it could be reheating whatever you make on Saturday or Sunday. That could even help them. But all of this would allow them to be alert and to be able to learn better. And with all of these tips, I have included sources with ideas to further assist you. So this is just an example of a quick meal. So, every meal trying to have something with protein in it. Protein is going to sit in their stomach, so that's going to leave them fuller longer. Try really hard not to include simple carbohydrates. I know that your kids are going to gravitate towards a cereal. I still gravitate towards cereal. I love, Fruity Pebbles, but those things disappear very quickly from your child's stomach, and it leaves them even hungrier than they were when they ate it originally. So you want to make sure that whatever you're giving them isn't going to spike their sugar so high that when it comes crashing down, they start feeling that afternoon, exhaustion. You just don't want to do that. So even if your child doesn't, because I know my brother, he hated healthy food. He just hated healthy food. So having a bunch of fruit in his lunch was not going to get him to eat healthy. So my mom had to be a little more creative, with the smoothies and things like that. But just figuring out something that would work for you and your child where it's not a heavy prep item. Now, number 3, buying a planner. So even your youngest kids, your elementary school kids can benefit from this, because I remember I grew up in Massachusetts, and in Massachusetts, every year we would get a planner with our school. Did you guys ever get one for school planner?
I never did, but I know my my biological child started getting them, I believe, in 3rd grade.
Okay. Yeah. So I will say, even though I wasn't the best, see, I have ADHD. I have ADD. And so organization was the worst for me. I'd have papers everywhere. My backpack never had any sense of balance or anything like that. But these planners I loved. I loved putting stickers on them. I loved writing on them. Now, granted, I don't think that they lasted more than 2 months of the school year, but just starting the year with a planner got my head back into being in school. A lot of times I have parents ask me, well, how can I know what my child has to do? Or how can I help my child the best? This is the best way to help them. This is the best way to help them become college and career ready. I'm not going to lie, this is going to take a little bit of nudging at the beginning. It is going to take a little bit of time on your part. I have found that I help my sister with my nephew, and when I ask him, well, what did you learn? Or, do you have homework today? Because I do some tutoring for her. And he'll say, nothing. It was fine. And I'm like, okay, well, did you learn anything? No. And like, he can say that, and I can't really say anything against that because I don't know what he's learning in school. But when I had him start writing down and showing me what he had due, then I was able to ask specific questions. For example, when he had multiplication tables for homework, I would say, okay, so what times tables did you learn today? Or what reading assignment do you have today? Okay, so what did you read with your teacher? And it just helped me keep him accountable, and it helped me keep track of what he was doing. So even when he was falling behind, I still had an idea of where he was. And so when his progress report came in, and my sister and I are looking at this to figure out how best to help him, I wasn't surprised because he had been writing stuff down. So I highly recommend that you encourage your child to do this. Even your teenagers, your teenagers are going into high school. They get a lot more classes. They have a lot of different assignments. It's so hard to keep track of that when they don't write these things down. And even though your child might buck at it and be like, oh no, I don't need to do this. I'm too old. You're controlling me. You're ruining my life, all the stuff. Even encouraging your child to put it in their phone. Maybe they don't want to write it down. Maybe they can use their phone as a planner. But just anything that you can do to encourage your high school child would be really effective, because this would really set them apart from not just their peers, but from adults when they get older and they start working. Now, 4 is kind of going to speak a little more to where you are, Krista, where you have, a situation where you're getting kids that are coming in different places and trying to figure out, well, how do I support these kids that are coming in different places that have these different learning gaps? What do I do? And setting clear expectations, but expectations that are really focused on habits, behavior, and growth versus grades are really going to help build your child's self-image and their desire and engagement with school. See, oftentimes kids don't disengage from school because they genuinely hate school. They hate school because at some point or another, they realized they weren't good at school. And when they realized they weren't good at school, then they begin to hate it. Or maybe they're gifted, right? And school is not challenging them anymore. School is not a place where they feel engaged. Creating expectations that focus on habits, behavior, and growth could really help engage your child in the learning process. And this is something that as teachers we're trying to move towards. We're not always perfect at it, but this is something I'm moving towards with my own students. So one way you can do this is, making your child aware of what you expect concerning their behavior and grades. And I'm not just talking about, be a kind student. I'm talking about kids that have failed my class have failed because they have done absolutely nothing. I have never had a child who has tried his absolute hardest and has failed. And I have yet to know of any teacher that has failed a student that has tried their absolute hardest. Because in every grade, there is the place of practice. And when your child is consistently practicing the skills, even if they're not maybe mathematicians or, they're not the next Shakespeare, they're practicing those skills. There should be a level of mastery as they're getting more and more practice. So even though they might not get an A, and D or an F is typically the result of not doing anything at all. And I have so many kids where, they miss one assignment, then it's 2, then it's 3, then it's 4. And before you know it, they're missing 5 assignments and they're failing the class and they're overwhelmed. And so, as a parent, one of the goals that you can give them is, I expect that you do every assignment. Even if you get them all wrong, I expect that you complete every single assignment, because just that process of completing things is going to build up not just their stamina, not just their comprehension, but also their self-image. Because when you start teaching them that, hey, it's not about your score, it's about growth. So let's try to do everything today. And then if we get all these questions wrong, let's look and see what we didn't understand. Let's learn that. And the next time, our goal is to get one more correct. And just a personal application, my nephew really has some severe learning gaps. That's why I kind of started tutoring him this year. And COVID just enlarged those gaps. He didn't have the proper instruction that he needed, if I'm being honest. He went to school every day. He showed up every day on the computer, but it just was very, very, very difficult. And so there were many times where he would take a reading test and he would get a 0. And he would just look at that score and be like, I can't do this. This is just not for me. And when I looked at it, I realized he wasn't answering things completely. So when we worked on him answering things completely, his 0 went to a 50, then it went to a 60. Then it was like, okay, so now that we've gotten to a place of completion, let's go to a place of mastery. Let's look at, okay, you're completing it, but what's going on that you're not doing well? And I realized he was answering everything way too fast. He was going way too fast. So I had to slow him down. So just try making expectations that are focused on habits, behaviors, and growth. So that way your child doesn't feel the pressure of having to be perfect. Because when your child feels that pressure of having to be perfect or having to get a certain numerical grade, they're not willing to try because they're not willing to fail. But if you make your expectations focus on habits, behavior, and growth, then they'll develop a growth mindset that allows them to be more flexible and willing to try these things. So these are just some examples. You will do an assignment over and over and score higher if your grade for the assignment is below a C. Now, I would say that specific expectation could be for your kids that are like, they're capable of more in a class. I had one parent whose child just knew she was not good at math. She could not do math. So her and her child's agreement was that child was going to make sure that at least every grade she scored was as high as a C, and that's all her mom expected. Even though this girl was a straight A student everywhere else, they just understood math wasn't her thing. So just figure out what works for you and your family. And then this goes right along with that, setting goals with your child, discussing with your child their thoughts and feelings about the upcoming school year. Look over the syllabi. I highly encourage you to do that. I know that there's a lot of jargon on these syllabi. I know that there's a lot of information on these syllabi, but as a parent, especially when it comes to the content they're being taught, when it comes to the coursework, the expectation for how much they're doing, it's very, very important that you read that syllabi. That way, let's say I had a parent, for example, I had a story on my syllabi that a parent didn't appreciate, that she wanted a different story. Now, I gave her an opportunity to reach out to me through the syllabi. Had she not done that, I would have never known she didn't want that story. But then I had a situation with another parent where they felt like their child needed some extra support. And so she read the syllabi and she saw that I had tutoring hours and she was able to set that up with me. So just be sure to read that syllabi. And then again, set goals for your students' behavior and grades. Be very specific with those goals. Write them down. Remind them. I know that so often the goal is to get an A. I get it. I mean, I know that you want your child to go to a great college and all of those things. But what colleges are looking at right now are consistency, extracurriculars. They're looking to see like growth. If your child didn't do the best freshman year, maybe they can grow sophomore year. Most college GPAs are lower than they've ever been. And if you're in the state of Tennessee, you do have the Tennessee Promise. So like, I'm not encouraging that your child get low grades, but what I'm saying is that there are scholarship opportunities for people that aren't scoring the 4.0s and the 3.8s, So really just set some realistic expectations, understand they're coming out of a pandemic, and do what you can to still be clear. Because I will tell you, my nephew really struggled. There were lots of tears, lots of anger, lots of silence. However, having those high expectations of him and maintaining them and being consistent with them helped him end the year at he went from failing every class to his lowest score being a 70. And that was all due to just the work that we did with him, with setting goals, with talking to him honestly. And that's another thing, be honest with your kid. If your kid let's say he's never scored above a C, okay? We know that he could probably score higher, right? But let's say, he hasn't gotten good grades. Last year was a really terrible year. Don't set the mark so high that it's impossible for them to reach. Set the goal at maybe 10 or 20 or 30%. Even 30 is a little high, but 10 or 20% higher than what they scored last year, because this is going to be a tough year for everyone. And so we want to make sure that we're giving grace, but we're still giving it with high expectations, because low expectations don't serve anyone. And I'm sorry, that was a really long explanation, but I'm very passionate about that because I see it so much in my kids where my kids were talking to me last year and I asked them, I said, what do you wish your parents knew? And they said, I wish they understood that I understand how important my education is just as much as they know that it's important. But I wish that they would talk to me. I wish that we could come to an agreement about what I should do instead of it being a one-sided conversation where the parent says, I want this, this, this. Let's have a two-sided conversation where we talk and agree, okay, I might not be able to get straight A's, but I can do, I can at least get straight B's or something like that. Because there was a lot of pressure. I teach at an Ivy school where students come in and they have this really intense curriculum. And I'm telling you, I saw mental breakdowns. I saw lots of tears. I saw anxiety attacks. And these parents are wonderful parents. They didn't do anything wrong. But the pressure they were putting on their kids didn't match. There wasn't that communication. And that's kind of why I'm so passionate about that. The next thing I'm passionate about is affirmations. Our kids are probably undergoing more negative influences than ever. Whether it's the media, whether it's the music, whether it's the current pandemic and the current cultural events, but all these things that are happening are filling our kids with lots of hopelessness, disappointment, anger, worry. And affirmations are just such a powerful way to challenge the negative things that your child is going through. A lot of children have like a fixed mindset where, they have this mindset that they can't get better. My nephew has the hardest time understanding that he can try again and improve. To him, if he doesn't do it the first time, then he's not good enough. That's it. He's just not good enough. And so just a quick story. We were at the park and my nephew doesn't have great upper body strength. I don't think we inherited that. I don't think that's something for us, but he was on a bar where he was hanging. Right. And so he's trying to hang and he's trying to lift himself up and he's not able to. And I said, and he goes, I can't do that. I'm just not strong enough. And I said, okay. And so he went to do something else and he was trying to hang from something else and couldn't do it. And he said, just can't do this. And I looked at him and I said, well, Jaden, have you tried this before? And he goes, well, not really. I don't really climb at home. I said, so you don't really climb, but you expect to be good at it, even though you haven't done it. And he looked at me, he goes, well, yeah, I mean, that kid is. And he pointed to a kid. And I said, well, that kid probably does this a lot. You don't. And so I had to remind him that he could do hard things with practice. And so that's what I told him. I said, you could do hard things with practice. And so that day he kept playing, kept eyeing this bar because I could tell he wanted to do it. I mean, he was just really wanting to do this. So he kept eyeing it. He kept eyeing it. And so he kept playing around in the park. And finally, by the end of that day, he had pulled himself up on this bar and had done this flip that he wanted to do. And I looked at him and I said, do you see that you practiced this and you were able to do it? Now, I reminded him that this isn't always going to happen. And, we can't always expect to be great after the first day of trying. But because he tried, he was able to do that. And so some of the affirmations you could do for your child that you can say before. I know a parent who doesn't let their child leave the car before saying these things. So they have to say it before they leave the car. I am constantly growing and improving. Might not get something the first time, but I'm a hard worker and I will eventually get it. I'm uniquely and wonderfully made. My differences are my superpower. Now, the reason why I have that last one, my differences are my superpower, is that our culture screams to our kids that their differences are a source of contention, that their differences are a problem, whether it's physical differences, I'm not tall enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not attractive enough. I need to change something. I need to put some filter over my face, right? Or it's gender differences, or it's whatever it is. There's so many differences that our kids are faced with. And it's always this idea of, I need to make it better. I need to conform. I need to put some filter, or we live in an Instagram world, and so it's very important that you affirm your child's differences, especially in high school. I tell my kids all the time, my students are shocked. I'm like, guys, I was hideous in high school. Like, guys, you don't understand. Like, I was ugly. Like, people would tell me, it's nice to see you, but you're not very attractive, you know? And I used to believe that. I used to be like, oh my gosh, I am so ugly. And my kids laugh because they're like, Miss Johnson, you're not ugly. Like, you look like one of us. You know, they're always super encouraging. And I'm like, but it took me leaving to realize that the differences, right? I wasn't very tall. You know, I had very big, frizzy, curly hair. So those differences now are things that make me even more powerful. You know, people connect with me because of my hair. Because I'm not too tall, I'm just tall enough for my husband, and I joke around with them, you know, because my husband isn't very tall either. And so just things like that, just telling your kids that their differences are their superpower. You are their parents. So they might be like, oh, mom, of course you think that, like you're my mom. But they listen to you guys way more than you think they do. I had some really eye-opening conversations with my kids where they would tell me how powerful it was to hear from their parents that they were loved, that they were special, that they were attractive, that they were valuable. I mean, that was huge for my kids. Actually, I had one kid tell me that they wish that their parent hugged them more. And I was like, but why? Like, you guys don't even like to be touched. And they're like, yeah, but you know, it's been a tough year, you know? And like, even though she's like, normally I do like that. So just be aware that your kids, they need that stuff. So what your child needs the most is love, support, and accountability. I think we do a lot of the love and supporting really well, but I think sometimes the accountability we let go because we think we're helping them. You know, we don't want to put so much pressure that we kind of hurt them, but accountability done well is a lot more effective than without accountability. See, I think we're in a culture nowadays where kids are not held accountable, where there's very low expectations set on children. And I think those low expectations are truly hurting them. And so by keeping them accountable, by checking in with them, you know, I still get the occasional grunts from my nephew every time I check on him with his grades. Yeah, it's fine, you know. But I noticed that when I'm not checking in with him, he's like coming up to me saying, hey, I did this in school today, you know? So he still wants that accountability, even though he doesn't necessarily always love it. Reach out and make contact with the teachers at the beginning in order to open those lines of communication. I'm going to be real. I have 160 students. Those parents that make contact with me are at the top of my list. I have their cell phone numbers and I'm texting them first. I'm looking at their kids' stuff first. Now, is that fair? No, it's not. But I'm just human. And those are the first parents that come out to me. So I try to make contact with all my parents, but I do have 160 of them. So there are moments where some parents slip through the cracks and I don't get contact with them. So taking the initiative of calling your teachers at the beginning and saying, hey, I'm Krista. I am the parent of this child. I just want to let you know I'm so excited to work with you this year with my child. Let me tell you a little bit about my child. And I think that's so important because sometimes teachers can misconstrue your child's intentions. Sometimes your teachers can look over your child because it's so easy to do. And when you start that conversation with your teachers, you are setting them off in the right foot. You know, with my nephew, with him having ADD, and then, you know, he has two brothers under the age of 3. So there's some sleepless nights. There are moments where he's not able to be as engaged, right? And I had to explain that to his teacher and say, hey, you know, he's not trying to be rude. He's just, this is what's going on, right? And she was able to extend grace. She was able to extend support because she knew. I don't always know what's going on in my kids' lives. So if you don't communicate with me as the parent, even your foster kids, I know I have a lot of foster kids that I'm working with. I had one foster mom who her and I are in constant communication with her foster child. Her foster child passed my class with flying colors, but did not pass other classes because she didn't have that relationship with that teacher. And so relationships matter, and that's what helps your child be successful. Now, your child may resist these things you're doing at first, but be persistent. It will pay off. At the beginning, these tips might take more time and they might cause more grief than what you want. However, if you're persistent, you won't have to continue to go back to the beginning with your child. I know with Jaden, it would take me these weekly sessions where I would check in with his grades. I would ask him questions about school. You know, those used to take me an hour because it would be the first 20 minutes of silence because he was just not happy about doing this. And he's a 10-year-old child, bless him. But after a while, right, I met with him today. We had 30 minutes where we just quickly caught me up in the first 5 minutes, spent 25 minutes on schoolwork, and it was done, And so it will get easier, it will get better. But just be patient, trust the process, because if you start now, I know that you have a 16-year-old, Krista. If you start this now in the spring, you're not going to be surprised if something comes up. You're not going to be receiving the phone call of your child not passing. I can't tell you how many parents I've talked to where they're like, what do you mean my child's not passing? And I'll say, well, but I sent you an email and your child's grades have been posted all year. And they're like, no, I didn't know. What can we do? And I'm like, well, there's not a lot you can do, and it stinks. And now we have kids that are missing some major credits because they didn't communicate with their parents or with us. They did not do as well as they should have. And now they have to play catch up, right? So to avoid that, the best thing is to be proactive. So Krista, I would love to hear, what is something that maybe you can implement or use with your kids?
Well, luckily the school has an app, and we have student view and parent view. And so I can communicate through that with the teachers, as well as see their grades, or when they were late to school, or if they have a missing grade. So I can stay in constant contact with their teachers through that.
Good.
So it is actually the perfect tool for me, especially with multiple kids.
Awesome. And then maybe since you have kids that are ranging from all ages, is there any, like with your 16-year-old, are there any strengths that that child really has as far as like, certain subjects or anything like that?
I just put a bite of food in my mouth.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're totally fine. Please. Now, Sandy, I know that with your kids, you have them in all different schools and all different things. Are there any subjects that maybe stand out? Like, for example, with Jake, I know, is he at the Christian school? I mean, the Catholic school, is that correct?
It's at Ivy Academy.
Or Ivy Academy, okay. And so was there some subjects that he's really good at and some that he's not so good at?
Absolutely. So he struggled more with Spanish this past year, but he did fantastically with algebra, which surprised me because I thought that was where he was going to struggle. But he did really well. And it's interesting to see each of the different children and their strengths and weaknesses and how different they are, especially as a mom and you're not anticipating it. Krista, I have been a foster mom as well. We adopted 3 of our 6 kids. So I totally understand what you're going through. They range from 17 to 9. So I'm there with you.
So, question, did you ever have like an issue with him completing his work as far as like, because he didn't know or didn't feel super confident?
All of the above, yes. And he was completely virtual last year. He didn't go back and forth. So there was a learning curve for it with even my husband and I, because the program they were using, we weren't familiar with, and it was not user friendly to learn. So being able to help him make sure he was on top of things or he was getting things turned in. Additionally, because the teachers were having to do double duty like they were this past year, not everything got posted like it would have in a normal year. So we were missing things on our end because they weren't always available to us. I am thankful that you pointed out, Denise, to contact your teacher, where I've homeschooled on and off, as you know, for several years, but I'd never wanted to be the parent that bothered the teacher or was needy or, anything like that. So that really helped me because I don't tend to do that unless there is a question or a problem. Do I talk to them? So to know that teachers or most teachers would prefer you to talk to them on the front end is good to know.
Yeah, that's huge. And also remember, like, while I appreciate that you want to be kind to us teachers, it's still about your child. And I tell my parents this all the time, when your child gets to college, I am no longer responsible. You are. And let's say um, your child gets a poor grade that they didn't deserve, that grade is going to follow them. So don't be afraid to pester your teacher. I don't care how upset your teacher gets. Do what you need to do for your child. And I tell my parents that all the time. I might not love you for reaching out so frequently, but I'm going to appreciate your persistence, and I'm going to see your persistence, and I'm going to take your child a lot more seriously than if you're not persistent. So I definitely encourage all parents. I don't care what their teacher is, communicate and be persistent, because those are the parents that get everything done. I mean, that's just the reality. Those are the kids that get the opportunities because their parents advocate.
Those are good points.
Now, Krista, did we give you enough time to eat?
Yes, that was perfect. I was actually thinking, with my foster kids, I feel like I am always like fighting for them. So like I'm always having to contact the teachers and saying, hey, she needs extra help in this, or he needs extra help in this. What can we do? So I feel like that's a constant battle. Hey, my kid is struggling in this. We need, what can we do to get through this? Well, can she do extra work? Is there a tutoring program? Is there something? I feel like I'm always trying to reach out for those issues. And one time I reached out to a teacher and I said, look, we're struggling, and I know that you are doing the best job that you can absolutely do.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us any advice? And she said that she was so excited to get that email because everybody felt like they were attacking her, and nobody said, hey, I recognize that you're doing everything that you can do. This year is crazy. Thank you. And so it's not just, encouraging your kids, but it's also encouraging the teachers.
Yeah. And, I will say, when I've gotten foster care kids, one of the challenges that I've had as a teacher is that I've not been educated on their situation. There are some times I didn't even know they were foster children. And technically, DCS doesn't have to give me information about the child. I remember there was one case where the child came from a situation where she was not supposed to leave the room. And she had a history of doing things that she shouldn't do when she would be allowed to leave the room. And I didn't know. And had I not communicated with that parent, because I got this random child and I said, well, let me call the child's parent. I would have been in a lot of trouble, and that child would have been in a lot of trouble. And I was able to keep a better eye on her. But when I asked DCS, I said, DCS, why did you just give us this information? I mean, we didn't know this stuff. They said, well, we're not at liberty to do that. So you communicating as a foster parent, maybe some of your kids' needs, or maybe you notice that your kid, when they get frustrated, this is a certain response that they have, or when they're very engaged, this is a certain response that they have. Telling the teacher that could really help the teacher help your student. But I will tell you that it is very frustrating when I'm working with foster care kids and I'm not aware of their situation and I don't know what's going on. And especially because, as you know, Krista, if you have visitation, right, that affects your children. Their attitudes change, their feelings change, and I don't know that. So all I'm seeing is that the kid is being disruptive, and all I'm seeing is that the kid's being disengaged. But if you could call the teacher and say, hey, I just want to give you a heads up, my foster kid had visitation, with his parents, and he's feeling a little blue about it, that would help the teacher give more grace and be able to appropriately handle that situation. But I'm going to be honest, there were situations I didn't know how to handle. And there were some times where I responded more shortly than I should have, where I maybe extended a consequence that wasn't appropriate, because I didn't understand the context of that situation.
That makes a lot of sense too. I have found with my adopted son, when my youngest one, when he would start acting out at home, I would take that to the teacher and say, hey, he's doing this at home, just want to let you know. But then there were a couple times that I realized I hadn't let them know his background for them to know he has severe ADHD or he has been through trauma, so he's going to react differently. And because I'm so used to it, because it's a day to day for me, I didn't really think about the fact that they didn't know, so it was just something that I needed to remind myself to tell them, which I know can definitely be one of the reasons maybe parents, when they don't tell, that might be why, but
Yeah.
it's definitely helpful for you to know.
Yeah. Well, Krista, I hope that you have a wonderful year. I know that you're making a great difference in those kids' lives. I'm excited to see those kids and how they turn out this year. I know even short times that people have with these kids are just so impactful. I've seen, foster kids as a teacher and spending short times with certain people and just the benefit that it's been to them, especially with their education, having someone to just come alongside them and advocate for them. Because that's the biggest thing, is advocates. Teachers, we love our students, but we're not perfect and we can't always do it alone. And sometimes we need that parent to be the advocate, to remind us of what we need to do. So it's been a pleasure being with you guys today. I want to make sure that I honor your time. And
Thank you, Denise.
It's over.
I greatly appreciate you being here with us tonight. Krista, are you from the Chattanooga area?
I'm actually from Decatur.
Okay. I have a couple giveaways for you if you would like them. I need to double check. I think it's a soft-sided cooler, an umbrella. I feel like it was something else that has left my mind at the moment, but Yogi's Primo Printing Shop donated some things as a giveaway, and you're not too far. Do you ever come to Chattanooga?
Oh yeah, every week.
Oh, well, if you could drop your email address in the chat box and I can reach out to you and we can arrange a time for you to get those, that giveaway, that door prize.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for being here.
Krista, if you would like my email to reach out to you for any support, whether I personally teach English, but I have been working in math and science and social studies with fourth grade because of my nephew. And I also just know a wealth of resources. So you can always reach out to me through email. I'll just put that in the chat just in case you want to connect.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I put mine in there. Feel free to email me.
And mine is just my full name, Denise Ramos Johnson.
Oh, okay.
Perfect. All right, got it. So thank you both again so much. And this will be on our YouTube channel, Krista and Denise. If there's anybody that reaches out that would like to see it, if they missed it or they have questions about it. So feel free to share it. And you guys have a wonderful night. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.